Hace 20 años teníamos un glaciar lleno de nieve.
20 years ago, we had a glacier covered in snow. You could ski all over it.
En el glaciar.
More than 17,000 feet above sea level, Bolivia's Chacaltaya Glacier was once a sheet of ice hundreds of feet thick. Perched on top was the world's highest ski resort, opened in 1939.
In
In 2005, we had only a little bit of glacier left. Then in 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, little by little, it continued to disappear.
This year, it's gone. This is Elizabeth Rosenthal for the New York Times. All that's left is the mountain's rocky slope, hard evidence of a much larger problem facing Bolivia: the increasing impacts of climate change.
I think where it becomes most clear what climate change means will be the water sector.
The many glaciers surrounding Bolivia's major Andean cities are crucial sources of water. Together, they make up an important 20% of the water used by the 2 million people living in the cities of La Paz and El Alto. The rest comes mostly from rainwater. The glaciers have essentially been the two cities' savings account.
Personally, I think it's really worrying because we don't have any more time.
World-renowned glacier expert Edson Ramirez once predicted that Chacaltaya would last until 2020.
Now it's gone.
In recent years, as temperatures rose and the dry season grew ominously longer, glacial meltwater kept city reservoirs from going dry.
I think the important thing about Bolivia is seeing that it is a very vulnerable country already. So we have climate change as an extra stress factor, as an extra problem, which is very, very complicated if you have no reserves left.
An extra stress factor for a country that's already South America's poorest. Bolivia has a history of water mismanagement, in part because there is little money to manage anything. One consequence is that roughly 40% of the water here leaks away. Also, the cities are growing rapidly, so the water supply can't meet demand. In La Paz, the wealthier of the two cities, people are aware of the problem but haven't felt its effects.
The city should be worried, but it's not at the level it needs to be. Why? Because we haven't yet had to deal with a problem like this.
If there weren't water, then we're in trouble. We're all really in trouble.
But in El Alto, water scarcity is already a part of life. In the poorest sections, people have never had running water in their homes. When the trickle from this canal dried up a few months ago, Celia Cruz began daily pilgrimages in search of water. Not only for drinking, but for cooking and cleaning too. She's afraid that next year may be even worse. If so, she's prepared to abandon her home, where she's lived for more than a decade.
If there isn't water, then I'll have to leave. There isn't another option.
In a worst-case scenario, water shortages could drive people from El Alto and La Paz, transforming the cities into major urban climate casualties. But Bolivia is a land of extremes. While La Paz and El Alto are running dry, other regions are lush and green, like Capi, a village in the foothills of La Paz's most iconic glacier, Illimani. This year, the rainy season arrived weeks late, and in recent years, it's become increasingly unpredictable. Agricultural engineer Edwin Torres Soria visits Capi several times a week.
The community is very dependent on the water that comes from the glacier, principally during the dry season, which is May to November.
10 years ago, a gentle stream of glacial meltwater, an ideal amount for farming, nourished these fields. Now, with Illimani melting, water gushes off the glacier and washes down the canyon, wasted. Year after year, the farmers have watched Illimani recede, fearful that it will eventually disappear.
If there was no water, it would just be better to die.
Experts say La Paz and El Alto's water problems could be solved by upgrading the water grid and building a high-tech reservoir.
If we're going to think about alternatives, then we have to do them right away. The effects are appearing much faster than we can respond to them. For example, let's take a reservoir. We're talking 5 to 7 years before it's constructed and can really be used. We may just not have that time.
Bolivia, emboldened by its indigenous leader Evo Morales, has taken the lead among developing countries, looking for money from the West. Many wealthy countries admit climate-based payments are justified. Some countries have already made tentative offers, but worry about how their money will be spent.
This is not about emissions or industry that Bolivia generates. But we're suffering the impact of climate change precisely because of the high emissions of developed countries.
Basically, what we lived on the last few weeks in La Paz El Alto was direct glacier melt. What's at stake for La Paz El Alto? If you talk about water, it's conflict. You wouldn't talk about civil war exactly, but it will be unrest. Without water, you don't go very far.